Do you want to go ahead and rank the Gabriel
Oh,
era?
I was gonna do that. I was gonna do that actually. I'm glad you reminded me.
Let's rank the Gabriel era
So
albums.
ranking the Gabriel era, easily in last place is Genesis to Revelation. Not a bad album. It just lacks what you want out of this era of Genesis. I gave it a 6 out of 10 though. Like some of the songs felt samey, but there's still a couple songs I'm like, okay, it's kind of interesting hearing Genesis do like psychedelic rock, but it's not my favorite. 5 is Trespass, but it's an 8 out of 10. The only thing that I miss on this album is Phil Collins drumming. The guy drumming on that album is just not as memorable. But there's still some cool early Genesis songs that's kind of like the prototype
Yeah.
of prog rock, Peter Gabriel Genesis. And it's still a worthy album, especially for songs like Looking for Someone and especially The Knife. The Knife is like the first really great Genesis song, in my opinion. Number 4, Selling England by the Pound. It's a little bit of a step down compared to like some of the albums that came before, but it still has its moments. And I still gave it an 8 out of 10, so I think it's a good album. 3, I'm going to go with Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, and I've already explained that one. Now,
this is the tricky one.
This is the tricky one. What am I going to put as my number 1? Nursery Crime or Foxtrot? Well, let's see.
I mean, one of them has Suppers Ready.
One of them has Suppers Ready.
Then the other one's got
Hogweed
and
Return of the Giant Hogweed.
Fountain of Salmassus.
Yeah, Fountain of Salmassus. And then, like I said, Foxtrot has Supper's Ready, Get 'Em Out by Friday, and Watcher of the Skies. It's hard choosing. But I will tell you I can tell you what my favorite Genesis song is in the Peter Gabriel era, and it is The Return of the Giant Hogweed. So for that factor alone, I will say Foxtrot's number 2, Nursery Crime's number 1.
Okay.
Can I get my Peter Gabriel ranking?
Make it even.
Yes. In the words of another progressive rock band.
My number 6 is going to be from Genesis to Revelation. I gave that 9.75 out of 10. That's the that's like the only one I'm going to be giving that score for a while, or less than a 10. It's good. I think it's a good pop album, but it's weird compared to their other albums. Number 5, I'm going to go with Selling England by the Pound. I don't think it's as good as the previous 2 albums that came. Actually, the previous 3 albums that came before. I think there's some really good highlights. I think Dancing with the Moonlight Night is amazing. I really like Hurt the Fifth. That's great. I just have it at number 5. Number 4, I can't believe I'm saying this, but Nursery Crime, I'm going to put it number 4. I really like this album. I'm not going to say it's bad or anything. This is a 10 out of 10 album for me. I really like this album. Musical Box is amazing. I think Harold the Barrel is a comedic genius of a song. Fountain of Salmassus is great, and I agree with Jacob. Return of the Giant Hogweed is just brilliant. Number 3, I'm gonna go with Trespass. I think this album is extremely underrated in the prog period of the band. From Trespass to Trigger the Tail, I think this is probably the most underrated of the bunch. My favorite songs are White Mountain and Dusk. I think those 2 songs are really underrated. I think The Knife is also great. I'm not gonna diss on that song. I think that song's awesome. I will say if Peter Gabriel, if this had Phil Collins and Steve Hackett on it, it would probably be my favorite Genesis album. That's how good it is. My number 2, I'm gonna go with The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway. Watch this review and you'll know why. Number 1, I'm gonna have to go with Foxtrot. That's my favorite Genesis song. Supper's Ready. Not only is it my favorite Peter Gabriel period album, it's my favorite Genesis album. It's like one of my all-time favorite albums. It's never gets old.
Okay, for me, 6 is obviously from Genesis to Revelation. A very odd album in their discography. Number 5 is Trespass, which I need to listen to more because I can see myself really getting into that album. The main thing is just I wish that Phil Collins and Steve Hackett were on that album, especially on The Knife. I do love the live version on the Genesis live album that does have Phil Collins and Steve Hackett on it. That's my favorite version of that song. But I also love White Mountain and Looking for Someone. Those are great songs as well. Stagnation is a really underrated song. And then number 4, Selling England by the Pound. Love it to death. But my rating, I think, has dropped a bit. I re-listened to it again. I gave it a 10 on the video, but now I'm going to give it a 9.75 just because the Battle of Epping Forest is a little too long and wordy. I love every other song on that album, though. Dancing with the Moonlit Night is fantastic. I love I Know What I Like, the Lawnmower song. Frith of Fifth is one of my favorite Genesis songs. I love More Fool Me. Phil Collins lead vocal, that one's great. Cinema Show is another one of Tony Banks' finest moments. Great album, but it just keeps getting better from there. 3 is Nursery Crime, which at one point was my favorite Genesis album, but then I just kept listening to the other ones and I'm like, no, this is my favorite one. No, this is my favorite one. Return of the Giant Hogweed is definitely in my top 5 Genesis songs with Peter Gabriel. When we do a top 10, we're going to have to do a top 10 Peter Gabriel and a top 10 Phil Collins, because I can't for the life of me do a top 10 on both eras. Then I also love Harold the Peril. It's so goofy. I love the musical box. Fountain of Salmacis is epic. Seven Stones has great Mellotron on it. Number 2 is Foxtrot. Supper's Ready, arguably the greatest song they made. So many just amazing things on it. If you want to hear my in-depth, watch the Foxtrot review. Get Him Out by Friday is hilarious. Watcher of the Skies has an epic Mellotron intro. Really cool album. But number 1, as for right now, is The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway. The musicianship on this album is just top-notch. And funny enough, Peter Gabriel and Phil Collins both said that's their favorite Genesis album, so they must have been onto something. Yes, we already talked about it. It's weird at times, but I think the great musicianship kind of makes up for the oddness of some select parts of this album. So that is my ranking. Oh, that is the Peter Gabriel Genesis discography. We have just completed all of it, and I'm really looking forward to talking about Phil Collins now, because the next album, Trick of the Tail, is fantastic. They proved that they could still go strong even without Peter Gabriel. And I'm really excited to get to cover that album, because that album features my favorite Genesis song of all time, which I'm not going to say what it is. Nick probably knows what it is. Jacob might know what it is, because I've talked a little bit about it in the chat. But thank you very much for tuning in. Do you guys have any final thoughts to say before we move on to Phil Collins next time?
Hi. Obviously, it's Robbery, Assault, and Battery. That's song of all time.
Yep, that's my favorite Genesis song. That Phil Collins caught in the accident. He should have sung all his songs like that.
In all seriousness, thanks for having me on, Scott. This was a blast. This review / Peter Gabriel ranking at the end was like, it's funny. It's like longer than the album itself, which is an hour and a half.
Only by a little bit. I'm surprised we got all this done in under 2 hours.
I did purposely leave. I purposely went a little vague on some of the songs because I didn't want it to last forever. But
I don't want this to be over 2 hours.
Yeah, great album. Thanks for having me on again, and I'm glad. I'm going to be happy to watch your guys' review on technically, commercially speaking, the sales say otherwise, but for the snobs, I'd say it's their most underrated period coming up.
Yeah, I love, honestly, I know it's running long. I'm trying to wrap it up, but listening to these albums, I realized anything from Trespass through We Can't Dance, I love it all. It's all great. Okay, I'm tired of the haters being like, you can't like this. It's commercially successful and it's not as progressive. Blah blah blah. I like the whole Genesis discography from Trespass up to We Can't Dance. It's all great, and I'm going to listen to all of it because these guys are musical geniuses. Even when they're trying to create pop songs, I can still hear artistic vision. It's all great. I'm really looking forward to talking about them.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of Chicago a little bit, because you got people that love the early era where it's like rock and roll with horns, and in the 80s they did primarily pop ballads. And people are like, oh, they sold out in the 80s. I'm like, no, they just they kind of change with the times, and there's nothing wrong with that as long as the music's still good. And to be honest, I love both eras of Chicago equally. So.
Yeah. To quote Phil Collins in this interview that I recently watched, Phil Collins was dissing the haters in this interview I watched on The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway. He was talking about making the song Silent Sorrow and Empty Boats on this album. He was saying that there's a certain romanticism to this song. And he said it's the same band that did this that made Hold On My Heart later on in the 90s. And he says people are starting to dog us for selling out or whatever, but it's the essence, the same band, the same spirit is still there. It's just different. That's what he said in the interview. So
Yeah. But it's kind of weird because like they don't like Phil Collins for doing more kind of like adult contemporary ballads in the 90s. But I'm like, he's still the same guy.
yeah, he's still one heck of a drummer too.
People say that Phil Collins, like this one person, which I'm not gonna say the name of it, said like Phil Collins should die or something. And I'm like, if you're gonna get mad at someone, you're getting mad at the wrong person. If you're gonna get mad at someone, get mad at Tony Banks. So it was his idea.
I can't get mad at Tony Banks. He's a keyboard wizard.
I'm not saying to get mad at him, but I'm like, if you're gonna be mad at someone, at least don't be dumb and be mad at the wrong person.
But kind of wrapping this up. Yeah, I had never heard a Peter Gabriel era Genesis song before this series. Maybe with the occasional like snippets behind the scenes, but not hearing the whole albums. But now I'm like, the Peter Gabriel era is actually good. I still think Phil Collins is the better vocalist, but this shows me that, yeah, Genesis stood on its own terms with a different vocalist. And, hearing this and comparing this to the hits that I know in the Phil Collins era, it's like, yeah, they're different, but you can enjoy both equally and still get something out of them.
Yeah. When I do my ranking of all the albums, it's going to be so weird because I'm going to have different ones from different eras. Like,
yeah, it will be hard ranking them.
It's not just going to be one era at the top and then the next era below that.
Yeah, especially if like the Phil Collins albums you can enjoy for different reasons. It'd be hard comparing the two, but
I will say, and this is going to shock some people. It's a little preview. My top two favorite Genesis albums are both Phil Collins albums. And this is coming from somebody who loves the Peter Gabriel era. I gave like 4 or 5 of these albums a 10. But my top two favorite Genesis albums are Phil Collins albums, surprisingly.
Well, it's fun. Well, it's not going to be surprising now, but like you're going to see my very positive reviews on the Phil Collins albums. But my top two favorite Genesis albums are two Peter Gabriel albums. So, I'm going to praise the hell out of Phil Collins. It just happened to be where it's placed.
Yeah.